was a man sitting on a park bench, and there was a bird that was particularly calm sitting by his feet, eating a few of the scattered crumbs. And as people passed by, they heard the man say, "Oh, you're not the bird you're supposed to be." So he bent down and picked the bird up, took some clippers out of his pocket, and began to clip a little bit off each wing, then a little bit off the tail, and looked at it again, just made a few corrections, and then about 1/8 of an inch off the beak. He looked at the bird and put it back down and said, "Now you're the bird you're supposed to be." Perhaps you have the same reaction as I did when I read that Buddhist story, one of repulsion and disbelief. Why would anyone do that to a bird? Most of us do not take this attitude to living beings, but I want to suggest that we often adopt that attitude towards ourselves. So easy to be caught up in the trap of trying to be other than who we are, to conform ourselves to some elusive cultural notion of perfection. And even if we're not aware of it, I think we're constantly striving for approval and to reach some norm that has been defined for us, some set of expectations, internal or external. And we drive ourselves only to find ourselves falling short of this elusive expectation, and most of the time exhausted from the effort. But then we hear the words of Jesus today, read by James to us: "Be perfect, just as your heavenly Father is perfect, just as God is perfect." So here we are, thinking, is this a goal we're supposed to reach? Now, I imagine that a number of us have taken it to heart, because I won't ask for hands, but how many of you have, let's call it, perfectionist tendencies? We want things to be right. We want them to be perfect. I think it's one of the illnesses of our society. We heard again from Jesus today the greatest commandment, which is the very core of the Christian faith itself, to love God and to love each other as we love ourselves. And I want to suggest today that the failure to love ourselves, or at least the constant struggle to love ourselves, is hindered most dramatically by our notions of perfection. In fact, our lifelong challenge, if you're on the same path that I'm on, of self-acceptance, the greatest obstacle to that self-acceptance, our notion of perfection. The Buddha says, hear it again, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." How many of us actually believe that? How many of us are able to practice that? But more importantly, how different would our lives look if we could really take it in? We would be more gentle with ourselves, and I guarantee that if we are more gentle with ourselves, we would be more gentle with other people. I could use some of that. How about you? This week, actually over the last 2 weeks, I feel like I've been on this spiritual learning curve, and I've had some insights that I want to share with you as we walk in spiritual community together. I read this of this group called the Stitching Buddhas. They are Tibetan applique students, and their teacher, Leslie Rinchong Wangmo, writes about her students' quest and need for perfection as they do their intricate applique. But here's what she says. She says that the students that strive most for perfection don't end up with the best end result. She says it this way: as our project takes shape, the perfection of the whole becomes evident, even as it's built on a series of imperfect steps. Fiber and fabric are irregular, like the world, like ourselves. Only a small part of the process is within our control. Perfection is built on a series of imperfect steps. Perfection isn't about being right, it is about being whole, about being complete. In fact, the Greek word for perfect that we heard earlier, be perfect as God is perfect, that word is telos. It literally means complete and whole. You remember the words of Jesus on the cross when he said, "It is finished." That word again is, it is complete. It is whole. Priscilla Storms, a member of our congregation who died just about a month ago, in the last hour of her life, said to me, "My life is complete. It's been imperfect, but it is complete, and I can now rest." She echoed the words of Jesus. It is finished. And when you think of what Jesus went through in those last moments, it's amazing that he was able to say, "It is complete." In all the imperfection that had just happened hours and a day before, it is whole, it is complete. So perfection is not the goal. Wholeness and completion is. I want you to think for a moment of all the movements or groups over time who have tried to create utopian societies, perfect societies. Not one of them attained utopia. And in fact, many ended tragically in the midst of destruction and devastation. And why? Again, the Greek word utopia, eu means not, topia means place. Utopia is not a place. There's no such thing that exists. The Persian carpet weavers understood this. They would always make a small but deliberate mistake in their design, because for them, perfection in their Muslim culture was the prerogative of God, not of humans. Now think about some of those Persian carpets or rugs you have seen. They're intricately beautiful. They are whole and complete in their imperfection, just like us. Anybody with me so far? Because I thought this was deep, actually. So trust the imperfections, the flaw in the diamond. There is no single sanitized version of perfection we must measure up to. There is no sanitized norm. We are called to be whole, to be complete, imperfections and all. In Keeping the Faith Without Religion, author Roger Housden says, if we can trust that our imperfections are part of our humanness, that they are not to be rejected but seen and acknowledged as part of our life in human form, then our relationship with self will soften, become kinder, and we will see ourselves in a softer light. And we will see others in a softer light also. So it is not about setting goals or not setting goals. It's great to set a goal, but know that in order to reach that goal, to reach that wholeness, it will be one imperfect step after another, but that's all part of the wholeness. How freeing it would be to look at perfection in that way. How broad the path would be to self-acceptance, to love for self, and thereby love for others. When I see my own imperfections are someone else's. How beautiful to be able to say, oh, it's part of the wholeness, part of the completion. So, it changes our perception. It's changed mine. Really has. So I'd like to say to you, it might be a surprise to my spouse, but I have a perfect marriage. I will not ask her if she agrees, but after more than 26 years, I can say I have a perfect relationship built on daily imperfections. But the foundation is love, respect, an unwavering acceptance of our own and each other's imperfections. And because of that, it is whole. It is complete. And I have a perfect congregation. After more than 12 years, I can say we are complete. As we strive for wholeness, each imperfect step is a step closer to that wholeness. We learn, we grow, we forgive, we accept, and along the way, we are transformed. As we are gentle with each other and we find joy where we can, we learn to give of ourselves more and more. And we learn to accept one another's and our own imperfections as part of the wholeness. There's a beautiful passage from the Gospel of John, an exaltation of the incarnation. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. People usually stop there, but it goes on. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. Grace, that unconditional acceptance, truth, that honesty and facing what is about ourselves and reality. And that's how I want to live, full of grace and truth. Jesus, it is said, is the embodiment of the divine, full of grace and truth. I'll close with Parker Palmer. I've been reading, he's a great Quaker, a teacher. I've been reading his book On the Brink of Everything, Grace, Gravity, and Getting Old. How many can relate to that? Okay. Especially the gravity part. Okay. In fact, I believe the band of brothers read this book together. In the prologue to the book, he says, looking back, I see why I needed the tedium and the inspiration, the anger and the love, the anguish and the joy. I see how it all belongs, even those days of despair when darkness overwhelmed me. Calamities I once lamented now appear as strong threads of a larger weave, without which the fabric of my life would be less resilient. And at the close of the book, he says it like this. Deep wisdom here. Today, as I close in on 80, I know there are no shortcuts to wholeness. The only way to become whole is to put our arms lovingly around everything we know ourselves to be. Self-serving and generous, spiteful and compassionate, cowardly and courageous, treacherous and trustworthy. We must be able to say to ourselves and the world, I am all of the above. And if we can embrace the whole of who we are and embrace it with transformative love, we'll imprison the creative energies within. So he says, meditate, pray, read poetry, and hang out with young people. Move toward what you fear and spend time in nature. At the very end, he says, and let me repeat my mantra, wholeness is the goal, but wholeness does not mean perfection. It means embracing brokenness as an integral part of life. And the sooner we understand this, the better. I can't think of a sadder way to die than with the knowledge that I never showed up in this world as who I am. I can't think of a more graced way to die than with the knowledge that I showed up here as my true self as best I knew how, able to engage life freely and lovingly because I had become fierce with reality. Even Michelangelo's David squints. Even Venus has no arms. And the Liberty Bell is cracked.